Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm Aya Soma, and I'm here with Bhante Sumita to my left and Bhante Sudaso to my right. And welcome to all the friends who have joined us this evening for Monk Chat. So you're welcome to type in your questions and ask any questions you might have for the monastic Sangha, and we will try our best to answer them. But first of all, hello, Shadow Label, good to see you. Welcome, Geeta, Aurora, Kumu, Vidura One, and Anita, Patricia, Liz, Jayantas, and Susan, who asks, actually, Suzanne, our MBA resident, had a question, right, for Bhante Sumita? That was?
How do you let go?
How do you let go? The question is when you know let go, that means you are holding on to something. Yeah, I think when we keep on holding to things, it's difficult to let go at the beginning. Even for a small kid, baby, if you give a toy, he or she will hold on to that so tightly, difficult. So they have to train. They have to be trained to share things with their siblings, maybe. Also, it depends on their sansaric habits, maybe. And those people who are practicing generosity, this is where we have a golden opportunity to practice let it go. That's why dana or generosity is a wonderful practice. That's where we have an opportunity to let go things, like you offer something that belongs to you. But when you let it go, when you offer that, you feel so good. And also, people who are holding on to so many things, the more you are holding on to that, the more you are attached to something or someone, the more you suffer. It's more painful when something happens to your near and dear ones, or something happens to some that you are holding on to that so dearly. That's difficult. That is why I think it's a constant practice. Like Buddhist people, they practice 8 precepts, and in once a month at least you practice 8 precepts. And this is also subtly allowing us a chance to let it go. Like we call it nekkhamma or renunciation. You sit on the floor, also kind of let it go, our ego. And also when you don't eat at night, you kind of let it go. You know, one meal a day that you are so craving for, and you don't eat, you're letting go. And then when we say Vikala Bhojana Veramani, that means you don't eat after afternoon. So that is letting go. You really see food, very delicious, yummy. You really want to, it's very tempting, but you don't eat. That is your determination, your virya and your adhitthana. And then you are so happy, um, like decorating your body, purification, right? And once a month you don't do that. You don't have any makeup, just simple letting go, practicing letting go. So and then like ucha sayana mahasayana means you even letting go the high and luxurious seats, letting go, just simple. This way, I think we have an opportunity to practice letting go. It's a process. Um, not only this birth, we have been holding on to so many things for so many births. So our sansaric habits can also come into effect. But we need to make some effort. We need to be determined. And so then we can let it go. Because nothing is impermanent. Even though you are holding on to something or someone, that person or thing will not be permanent. It will be impermanent. So the yada nichang tang dukkang, when something is impermanent, that is suffering. That is suffering, right? And maybe for our body, or we think of someone else who is so near and dear to you, but still impermanent. You can control. So letting go can happen when you know the reality of it. Anicca, when something is impermanent, that is subject to suffering. When something is suffering means you can control. No control over that. So that is why we should be able to control that.
Thank you, Bante. Do you have any follow-up questions, Suzanne, or is that good?
I think I'll have to think about that.
Sounds good. Sounds like an appropriate response. And Aurora asks, what is the difference between the lower fetter of identity view and the higher fetter of conceit? Very good question. Bante Siddhartha?
So my understanding is that the lower fetter, which is called Sakaya Ditti, which means self-identity, the perspective of self-identity, is that this is identifying as the five khandhas or some particular aspect or detail of the five khandhas. So identifying as your body or as your mind or as your emotions or your thoughts or your beliefs or your opinions or your perspectives or any of that. So it's specific self-identity. So a self-identity which has some kind of specific object or activity which is connected to it. Whereas the higher fetter of conceit, which in Pali is called asmimana, so asmimana literally means the concept of self-existence. So asmi means I exist, and mana means the conceit or the concept. So asmimana is the belief in self-existence. So the difference there is that asmimana doesn't necessarily have a specific object. So Sakaya Ditti is I am this. This is me. But Asmimana is just I exist. I am. But there's not a specific identity connected with it. There's just a generalized feeling of self-existence, but not with any specific detail. So as I understand it, that's the difference between these two things.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bante. And Susan asks, what is merit and how do I make it? What sort of things are merit? Actually, I was thinking about answering this question, but I'll pass it on to Bante Sumita.
What is merit and how do we make merit?
Yes, I actually would like to hear.
Merit in Pali means punya. Punya means chittang punati iti punya. That is how it is defined. So when your mind becomes so happy without any greed, hatred, or ignorance, that is a very powerful feeling. That positive energy, that wholesome energy, is really powerful. When you have that meritorious, wholesome energy in you, you can do many things. In fact, you become physically healthy, you become internally, mentally also healthy, and you can share that powerful energy with the other people around. Other people can feel when you are so happy inside, deep inside. When you are happy, your face can be reflected with that. And so how to do these things? There is another word called kusala. Kusala means skillful. Kusala means actually also some would call it wholesome. So the person who is skillful in dealing with very unwholesome or negative emotions or energies within you. So the person who is skillful can get rid of them. So through the body, through the bodily, verbal, and mental activities, we should be able to figure out, identify, recognize our own negative energies, negative emotions that come to you from time to time. So this mind is such that we can have any control. So it is like at the beginning, things naturally come to us. It is like open gated place where anyone have the access. But really important person is there, what we call gatekeeper. That is the sati, the mindfulness. When we have sati, the mindfulness, whosoever coming in and out, the gatekeeper will take care of it. So it's really important that we have sati within us. If we don't have sati, it will be a place where, like a charnel ground, nobody is taking care of it, and whosoever can come in and out. So it's anybody's place. Similarly, the thoughts will come to us if we don't have the mindfulness to recognize them, to observe them. Those thoughts can be established within us. Let's say anger comes to us and we have no mindfulness. What will happen? Anger can go deep inside and it will poison us. It will toxic, be so toxic within us. It will grow like a poison tree, slowly, slowly. The anger, frustration, and then the hatred, and then the revenge. All these things can happen to us, and it can be really disastrous, so detrimental, killing our own internal peace, and also then intoxicating or making everyone else impacted very badly, like a pandemic. So we have to be really careful about that. I think practicing dana sila bhavana, taking care of observing 5 precepts, 10 precepts. This is how we generate good merit. Yeah. So practicing dasa kusala, or the 10 wholesome deeds, will be very helpful. And observing 5 precepts, 8 precepts, 10 precepts can also be very helpful.
Thank you very much, Bante. And Shadow of Labels asks, is there still attraction when overcoming not secure desire, but sexual desire? She corrected later. So I will answer by quoting actually Bhikkhuni Subha from Jivaka Mango Grove from the Trigata, who says, "What is it like? I do not know. It has been uprooted entirely by the path." So essentially, she actually, the story is that she is in the forest and she's stopped by a rogue who apparently was somewhat good looking. So, or Mara tricked her and manifested as a very good looking man. Who tempts her to, stray away from the path by telling her about all the different sensual pleasures that there can be in samsara and how she could have had a great life with him in a beautiful house with all the comforts, with beautiful clothing, etc., etc. But he didn't know that she was fully enlightened, so she was completely, zero attraction for him or for anything else that is presented to her. And as a matter of fact, the more he tells her how good looking she is and how beautiful she is, at a certain point she goes, "Really? Seriously? What do you find so attractive in this, diseased sort of chunk of meat? You really like my beautiful eyes? How about I give it to you as a present?" So she takes her hand, takes the ball of her eye, uproots the eye from her face and gives it to the rogue, and he's disgusted by it. And all of a sudden, he also realized that actually that eye was not that pretty anymore once it was not in its orb, right? I think you say it, orb in English?
Socket.
Orb socket. Yeah. So yeah, once you see things as they really are, when someone is fully enlightened like her, she didn't have to actually see the orb outside of the socket. She understood what this chunk of flesh and meat and pus and all the unpleasantness and pleasantness things of the body too. You see it all together. You see it as it is. So it's not attractive. Yeah, you've overcome it. You've uprooted it. So she's uprooted this by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. So we can all do it. So it's not a stage of like disgustingness. It's not a stage of repulsion, but it's a stage of understanding things fully as they are. When you see dirt, you see dirt. You don't find it like, oh, look at this like attractive dirt. I want to do I don't know what with it. You're like, okay, it's dirt. It is what it is. This is plants. This is matter. So that would be my answer to this. And Indigo Sky asks, the Buddha says there is pain, there is pleasure, and there is neither, Vedana. Why does he not discuss the existence of both simultaneously?
Well, according to Abhidhamma, technically speaking, you can only have either a painful Vedana, a pleasant Vedana, or a neutral Vedana. But that something cannot be simultaneously pleasant and painful. So it's kind of like a pendulum. So a pendulum has three positions. It can be to the left, it can be to the right, or it can be in the middle. But it cannot be simultaneously left and right at the same time. So it's either in the middle, or it's to the left, or it's to the right. But it cannot be simultaneously left and right. So in the same way, any Vedana is going to be, if it's not neutral, then it's going to be either leaning towards pleasant or leaning towards painful. But it cannot be both at the same time. So when we do experience something that seems to be both pleasant and painful, we're actually experiencing two separate Vedanas, two separate feelings. So a pleasant feeling and a painful feeling, but they're not the same, they're separate feelings. And again, according to Abhidhamma, you're actually not even experiencing them in the same moment. You're experiencing them in sequential moments. Though that point is not specifically mentioned in the suttas that I'm aware of. And in our daily experience, it doesn't make a huge difference either way. But the point being is that the individual sensation can only be one of these three things: neutral, or leaning towards the pleasant side, or leaning towards the painful side. But it can't be both pleasant and painful at the same time. It can't be both left and right.
Thank you, Bante. And this is somewhat related, so maybe you can take it too. Hayden says, when some teachers describe Vipassana meditation, they mean Satipatthana practice, while others suggest something more like contemplation of Dhamma concepts. What is the best way to cultivate insight?
Whatever way leads towards the reduction of your defilements and letting go of sankharas. So there are innumerable ways of developing insight, innumerable ways of practicing Vipassana. But they all come down to this basic point. Does it help you to reduce your defilements, to let go of phenomena, to come to a deeper direct understanding of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self? Then that's good. Keep doing it.
Thank you, Bante. And Kumos asks, in the suttas directed at lay people, does pleasant abiding and concentration refer to samadhi, and therefore the four jhanas as it is for the monastics? For example, in the Gihi Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya 5.179. Bante Sumita.
Can you repeat that?
Yes. Kumu asks, in the suttas directed at lay people, for example, the Gihi Sutta, Does pleasant abiding in concentration refer to samadhi and therefore the 4 jhanas as it is for the monastics?
I think for the lay people, practicing jhana would be very challenging because you have so many attachments, so many household chores, so many family bonds, a lot of things to do, but still possible if you are um, focusing on your own practice. I think I'm not sure the Kihi Sutta in particular, but overall the jhana practice is such that you need to really focus, like practicing in seclusion, practicing deeply. You've been able to work on your own practice, and you should be able to concentrate one thing at a time and not thinking of anything else. Maybe in daily basis, if you practice morning and evening, that will also be very helpful to you. And it's also a matter of being mindful of everything that you do. Gate thite nisinne sutte jagarite. Like when you walk, when you work, when you talk, when you think, everything when you do with mindfulness, you are having that control over you. You have that monitoring capacity in you. That is what is important, really required for you to have control over your thoughts, being able to um, observe the mind that is so fast. Thoughts can come to you every fraction of a second. So the person who has trained his or her mind can do that, even in the midst of very busy streets. They can do it if you have trained yourself. So it's actually a matter of practice. So sometime from time to time, I think it's good to practice like daily 5 precepts, and then monthly 10 precepts, 1 day practice, and then also from time to time, like maybe once a year or twice a year, go for a 10 days retreat. Will give you that opportunity to practice in keeping in touch with your practice.
Thank you, Venerable. And Liz has a question for all of the 3 of us. Do you listen to guided meditation, or is all your meditating in silence? My meditation is all in silence. I actually didn't like guided meditations, not even when I didn't know how to meditate. They were helpful back then for a little bit, but actually they were more of a hindrance than anything else. Bhante Sumita, do you listen to any guided meditations?
Yeah, I think it depends on, like, personally, when I lead the guided meditation, it helps me more. And also, if I feel like listening to someone who has that soothing, calming voice, and also the content is very good, I don't mind listening and practicing. Sometimes I actually, when I listen to some Dhamma talks, I really make it as a guided meditation. I just close my eye and meditate and listen to that. That will actually go very easily into my mind. So I am happy to listen to Dhamma talks and also sometimes meditations as a guided thing. It will help me. If it helps me, I am very happy to follow that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bhante. Bhante Sudaso?
Personally, I've never been a fan of guided meditation. Similarly, even when I was very first starting, what I'd like to do was to get instructions beforehand and then try out the instructions on my own in silence. But I've never personally liked guided meditation. I usually find them more distracting rather than helpful. And also my own meditation practice, especially now that it's been a while that I've been practicing, and I have many different techniques. I'm often feeling out what the right way to meditate is during any given meditation session, which may have nothing to do with what the person guiding the meditation wants us to be doing. So yeah, I usually find I get much, much better results with silence rather than with guidance. But I know that many people like guided meditation and benefit from them. But even if you're someone who likes guided meditation, I'd recommend to do at least half your meditation periods in silence. Don't do guided meditation all the time because it does prevent you from getting into deep concentration.
Thank you, Bante. And Anita asks, can you please explain Chitta? Is it the purified mind, Bante Sumita?
Pabasara migdam bhikkave chittang tanchakopana agantikehi upaklesehi upakilitan. This is how it is actually explained in the suttas, I think, in Anguttara Nikaya. So the mind in its pristine form is very luminous. That is being defiled from the incoming defilements. All the thoughts that are coming to us can defile that. So that chitta, with it in its purest form, can be very luminous. But we have to work on how the layers and layers of defilements can corrupt that, can shield that beautiful status of mind. So we have to. That is what actually what we do, like letting go, practicing deep jhana, concentrating, focusing, samadhi. All these things are actually meant to find that inner, that pure form, that luminous form of the mind.
Thank you, Venerable. And Michael says this morning, my origami was asking, how can I know if monastic life is for me? I must have missed that question. Sorry about that. But actually, it's good because it wasn't related to this morning. So it's good that it's coming up on chat. So how can I know if monastic life is for me? Well, go to a monastery and you'll know pretty quickly if monastic life is for you or not. Or if you have that inclination of mind, rather than whether it's not for you, whether it's for you or not in that particular moment. So if you go to a monastery, we can have so many different ideas of what it's going to be like. And usually we have, sort of Google Images type of idea, very stereotypical, like, oh, so peaceful, blissed out, here. My lay life is such a disaster, but if only I went to the monastery, I wouldn't have to deal with my partner, my husband, my wife, or whatever, or my job, or my this, or my that, or my children, or my lack of children, whatever it is that we think that it's so disturbing to us in lay life. Well, actually, when you go to a monastery, you'll have that emphasized a million. So you think, for example, you're not going to be, since you're celibate, you're not going to be in a relationship. Well, actually, you're going to be in a relationship with multiple people. Just a celibate relationship, so even worse sometimes. And all of them who you haven't even picked. So and there's usually in lay life you go through normally a screening process. I like that, I don't like that. While in monastic life you don't have that, so you're basically married to the Sangha. So anyone gets ordained in the Sangha with whatever background, whatever temperament, whatever type of education, whatever type of interest. So if you're trying to escape from that, emphasize a million in monastic life. Well, you don't want to have children? Well, guess what? You go to a monastery and then you have children of all sorts of ages, from the actual babies to the actual adults. And you're, to one degree or the other, responsible for their, spiritual development. So that's one, it's the small print that they don't put in monastic life. There's all of these things. We can't escape anything in samsara. What we do with monastic life is actually deal with it. So we put the robes and we're like, okay, now I'm going to make this the focus of the objective of my life, to deal with all the greed, hatred, and delusion that comes into my mind, and overcome any hatred from being in a relationship, or every hatred of like wanting to be in a relationship, because sometimes actually you want to hang out with your fellow monastics and nobody wants to hang out with you. So you have to also, be in solitude, like especially during the winter retreats, you can't see anyone at all, or you see people, everybody's in noble silence. So if you're someone who's very extroverted, a lot of people can struggle with that. But usually you'll understand, you'll have a feeling when you go to a monastery of where you're at in the path, and whether or not it's something that interests you to explore. But I encourage you to not be too fixated on the form, as Bhante Sudaso was sharing in that beautiful sutta the other day. This path can be practiced by anyone, whether one is a monastic or a lay person, whether one is female or male, or everything in between, or outside of that, right? So like it's practice first as a lay person, how you are right now, practice. And then the more you let go, the more you start practicing like a monastic, perhaps. Then at a certain point, you just realize, this is what happened to me. At a certain point, I was already practicing like a monastic. So I actually didn't make much of a shift. It was more like, okay, well, my life is like this, very monastic. I might as well like put the robes on and make it official. And so it's a natural evolution rather than a radical decision. Because I feel like radical decisions come mainly from aversion rather than from real sort of vocation. So this is what comes to mind. Oops.
Lots of questions.
Yeah, lots of questions. So
yeah.
Are you guys going to dress up for Halloween? Well, I feel like we're dressed up 365 days a year. So actually, it's the one day where, when we were in New York City, Halloween was the one day where nobody was looking at us in a weird way. We were fitting right in. Actually, we were getting compliments. We're like, oh, you planned this ahead of time, like you matched all your robes, even the haircut you got together. So in the West, we're a little bit, a bit of a dress up all the time. And Aurora says, how long did it take you to learn Pali, and how did you learn?
So it took me 1 year, and I learned, first I learned the grammar through some Pali textbooks, which are quite accessible and you can still get these days. Then once I had a good sense of the grammar, then I just started reading through the suttas in Pali. So using a method which I've since learned is called the pony method. And I have no idea why it's called the pony method. But this is where you have the text in Pali and the same text in English. And you first read a sentence or a paragraph in Pali, then you read the same thing in the translation and try to figure out the meaning of the Pali words based on the translation. So once I had the basic grammar down, then using the pony method, I was able to very quickly accumulate vocabulary. So this is how I was able to learn Pali in 1 year. So if I can do it in 1 year, so can you. This was also done with a quite modest commitment. So I made a commitment for doing, I think, 20 minutes a day. So I often spent more than 20 minutes, but not that much more. So it doesn't, in my opinion, Pali is not a terribly difficult language. I learned it in 1 year, so can you. It just takes persistence.
Thank you, Bhante, also for sharing the pony method. That's quite interesting. And Bhante Sumita, you, I think, is your first language or second language Pali. How long did it take you to learn when you were a child?
Maybe? I think when we were young monks, novice monks, we started learning Pali and Sanskrit together. And also it was closer to our language, mother tongue. Sinhala was derived from Pali and Sanskrit. So we had hundreds and thousands of words from same Pali and Sanskrit. So it's not that difficult for us. And also depending on the age, sometimes people, when you are little late, then it will take some time. But in my Pali classes, there is, I remember there is one person, he is 78. He's from Malaysia. He's amazing. He's so dedicated and he never misses a class. And he's really very enthusiastic in learning the language. I really feel sometimes in your later age, you should learn a new language that will give you so much good energy. So you have something to do, something that your brain is so busily occupied with. That way, also you will learn. Pali is one language that you don't have any abusive or always, all the words are very blissful and really amazing. And I think those Buddhist suttas and all are so full of blessing. Wonderful to learn that language.
Thank you to both venerables and Liz.
Ayasoma, what about you?
Oh, well, I'm still in the process of learning Pali technically, even though I'm translating it already. So I studied ancient Greek and Latin when I was in high school. So I did not know, but they are, when I attempted studying Pali, I did not know they were related, but they are, and they actually have the same grammar structure. So at the very beginning, I was trying to study the grammar books, but I was actually getting a lot of aversion because it reminded me of high school when I didn't want to study ancient Greek and Latin grammar, but I had to. So then at one point, I just, opened the digital Pali reader and started translating. And I realized I knew how to translate already because I had spent 5 years translating Latin and ancient Greek, and it's the same. Like we have the same declinations, we have the same, like verbs work in the same way. So I wouldn't say that I have learned Pali in the way that my vocabulary is still quite poor, but yeah, I definitely know how to translate, which is a very good skill. Liz says, do the colors of your robes have meaning? Do you want to answer?
No. As in, no, they don't have any meaning.
Yeah, it's pretty much whatever was donated to us, right, Pante?
The diversity.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, originally the robes were just dyed with whatever natural dyes were available. So the robes, they would be made with dye made from bark or from wood or from mushrooms even. So basically anything that gives kind of a brownish or yellowish or kind of muddy color. But that there was a lot of range and variety. Sometimes it's just generally called the fallen leaf color. So autumn leaf colors, pretty much any autumn leaf color is an acceptable robe color. But it's the point is that these are all cheap, easily available dyes. And actually, we're not allowed to wear colors which would have been expensive. So, for example, colors like royal purple or bright blue. These were very expensive at the time of the Buddha. They were very hard to get. So we're not allowed to wear those colors because those colors represent luxury and wealth. Whereas the colors that we wear, these are peasant colors. These were the sorts of things that poor people would dye their clothes because these colors are very easy to make using dyes that you can get from nature. So that's the origin of this. We're wearing peasant colors. So very simple, cheaply available, natural colors.
All right, thank you, Bante. And Kumo says, does doing merit expecting things also keep one bound in samsara? How can we make merit without making attachments or wishing anything in particular? What is the best way? Well, what comes to mind is the sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. I can't remember exactly the name of the sutta, but anyway, the Buddha explains, maybe it's Sariputta who explains, well, an enlightened being explains the different types of giving and the different types of results that one can get from them. First of all, by stating that actually giving is always a good idea and always brings good results. But there are some, sort of lower forms of giving and then there's the most supreme form of giving. So I think this is actually very pertinent to what you're asking. And so the most sort of kind of lower way of giving is by actually understanding that it leads to a good destination after you're dead, after either in this life or when you're dead. So you go like, okay, I'll give this to Bhante Sudato, so I'm going to make sure I'm going to always have pens, in my future life or in this life because I really like pens. So it can be very utilitarian. Or perhaps, we can give because it's a family custom, or we can give, because it feels good, actually. Like sometimes, actually not sometimes, most of the time, when we start giving things out at the very beginning, if we're not used to it, it feels a little bit uncomfortable. But then you're actually so like you see how it's really pleasant. It makes you feel really happy. So you're like, oh, giving is good. Giving is great. It's actually quite pleasant and nice. So I used to actually love feeding monastics when I first got into Buddhism. So I would go to the temple and spend a lot of time actually before at home and making food, and then bring it to the Sangha and give it and put it in the bowl. I loved it. It made me so happy. Yeah. It was a natural sensation. So that's wholesome, the Buddha says. Those types of giving will lead you into a heaven rebirth. But then after that karma is exhausted, you're going back into unpleasant states of existence, either back to the human realm or to actually a hell realm potentially as well. Because the fruit, the good result of those actions, then at a certain point gets exhausted. But instead, he says that the foremost way of giving is when we think, when we actually take giving, these acts of generosity, as an ornament of mind. So something that beautifies the mind, something that leads towards a cessation of suffering, towards supreme blissful enlightenment, towards the eradication of greed, hatred, and delusion. So it's something that is the foremost, something that we want to beautify our minds with, much better than any type of makeup, much better than any type of like fancy dress, or fancy building or fancy anything, that we can put on or associate with ourselves, right? So then that actually creates the conditions for the cessation of suffering rather than keeping us wrapped up in samsara. So this is what comes to mind. And Dinko says, can you talk a little bit about meditation on the 4 elements? Should we take one element for the entire session or contemplate all 4 in a particular order? Oops, Bhante Sudaso.
Well, first off, I recommend doing the 6 elements because I actually was never interested in the 4 elements meditation until one day, many years ago, my preceptor was giving a Dhamma talk and he just mentioned the 6 elements, that he does the 6 elements. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And the 6 elements I find much more mind expanding, much more delightful. But as for your question, either approach is actually perfectly fine. Especially with a longer meditation period. Sometimes you can go through multiple elements and even all 6, or 4 if you're doing the 4. You can go through all 6 and have a very deep experience. But you can also get incredible efforts just from picking one element and just focusing on that one element for the whole session. So try both ways and see how it goes. And also sometimes it will depend on how you feel at the start of a meditation period. You might feel like focusing just on one or on going through many in the session. So both approaches can be useful depending upon the circumstances.
Great, thank you, Bante. And Alex asks, do you use, and this we can pass to Bante Sumita, do you use noting experiences as they arise? If so, elaborate a bit, please. I think it's the Mahasi method that he's referring to.
Noting method?
The noting method,
yeah.
Like feeling.
Would you like to explain?
Oh, well, I don't use it. So I don't use the noting method. And since you don't know what it is, then you probably don't use it either.
Yeah.
Well, the noting method is from Mahasi Sayadaw, so it's a pretty popular technique that many practitioners use. And so, as Bante was mentioning, it's essentially labeling whatever experience we're having in that moment, whether it's emotional or actually like physical. That is my understanding. I also don't practice this method, so we're all like unqualified to speak about it. But I have practiced it here and there when we have teachers who taught it. So for example, if you're walking, you say walking. If you get irritated, you start going irritation, something like that. So noting whatever kind of experience comes into being. And so it is helpful, I guess, to establish mindfulness in the present moment, because otherwise we get, instead of going irritation, go, oh, I don't like this, like that person said this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm probably like getting triggered because I experienced this when I was 4 years old. Oh, it's the fault of my parents and like blah, blah. Like we start having all these conversations with ourselves that lead to more and more suffering rather than the cessation of suffering. But instead, essentially, we bring up in the mind a sort of mantra that helps us identify whatever the experience is there. So even though I don't actually practice the Mahasi method, I think I have incorporated a bit of a few things from when I practice with, Venerable Yuttadhammo actually was the first one who taught me this method. But we've had some other monastics in the history of Buddhist insights. Anyway, so what I did I found useful was to actually, when I do what I call mindfulness of emotions. So if I'm experiencing strong emotions and I sit down in meditation, to note it at the very beginning. To use the noting method at the very beginning and go, for example, irritation, or even actually like pleasure, or happiness, or boredom, or whatever it is that we're experiencing, the satisfaction. So noting it, spending a short amount of time to sort of create this connection between the mind and the experience that one is having. And then I drop it. And I just observe, I switch to mindfulness of the body. So the physical feeling of the emotion that I'm experiencing. This is why I don't like guided meditations, because I'm very creative in the way that I that I meditate. It really depends on what is currently happening in the mind and in my experience. But yeah, when you have retreats on the Mahasi method, it's usually the entire time, like the entire day, you note every single thing that is happening, and that is supposed to create the conditions for insight to arise. And Ben says, my heartbeat causes a slight rocking in my body during meditation. This can be very distracting and often prevents stillness arising. I've experimented with putting my back against the wall. Advice? Bante Sumita, do you have advice for the heartbeat causing a slight rocking in the body during meditation?
I remember someone was asking about similar question like this before, and I think it's also a part of some people when they practice. It can happen to us sometimes. We also feel like we are like leaning to side. It can happen because when we kind of relax our body, these things can happen to us. But if you notice that you are slanting or you are leaning to, and it's good to actually, if you know that you can correct the posture. And I think Bante Sutaso knows about Zen meditation practice. Yeah, the teachers actually correct them with a stick or something, right? Yeah, so if you have difficulty in keeping your body straight, maybe it's a matter of time, I guess. You should be able to do that, but at the beginning it can change a little bit. But it's important to keep the body straight. Ujjunkayang panidhaya parimukang satingupatapeta is mentioned that you need to keep your body upright. That way your respiratory system works smoothly. And if you block your respiratory system, it might hamper your meditation as well. So I think it is good to be mindful about that. Maybe Bante can add a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would also just add to it that slight involuntary movements of body are nothing to be bothered by. So just be aware of what your body feels like. And if your body is moving a little bit, well, that's okay. That's just how the body feels in that moment. So as long as you don't make a problem out of it, then it won't distract you. So that would be my recommendation, is just don't make a problem out of the rocking movement. That's just how the body feels sometimes. And something interesting happens when you stop making a problem out of it, then your body will feel like it's still. Even though it might be rocking a little bit or swaying a little bit, your body will feel like it's still. And the reason it feels like it's still is because your mind is still. When you don't move your mind along with the movement of the body, then the movement of the body will not disturb your mind. And no, I do not recommend leaning against a wall. Meditating leaning against a wall is bad for 99% of people. That's not a good idea. And the other 1%, still probably not a good idea. Yeah, don't do it. Sit up straight.
All right, thank you, Venerables. And Liz asks, we love living with our 18 cats, 2 dogs, 3 bunnies, and 1 mouse. Can monks have animal companions in monasteries? Bhakti-Sutta.
Well, it depends on the monastery. Most monasteries do not allow personal pets, but many monasteries do have temple animals. So commonly they're rescue cats or rescue dogs, which live at the monastery and are taken care of by the monastic community. It's relatively common. Yeah, most monasteries do not let you have personal animals, but there might be a monastery cat or a monastery dog or occasionally a monastery chicken or something of that sort.
Yes, we have an Empty Cloud Monastery, our monastic cat. His name is Stan. But if you Google actually Ajahn Buddhadasa roosters, there are amazing pictures of Ajahn Buddhadasa, who was this lovely forest monk in Thailand, with all these beautiful pictures of the rooster pets at his monastery. They were really cute. And Liz asks also, I'm on the autism spectrum, high functioning. Do you know of autistic monks? I personally do not know, but okay.
I know at least 2 come immediately to mind, and there's probably a lot more. Yeah, it does happen. It's if you have a condition of some sort and it's not severe, if it's mild, then you can find monasteries which will be happy to have you.
Thank you. And Hayden asks, do you find reading the suttas in Pali gives a much deeper understanding, or are translations good enough? I would say both. Translations are good enough, and the Pali gives you a much deeper understanding. But if you don't have understanding, just stick with the translation instead of also like learning Pali. Then once you've understood the basics of the Dhamma, then you can delve more deeply into it. And Antonio, buonanotte actually, because it's in the middle of the night. Antonio is our friend from Naples, who will be soon meeting in person in a few weeks, hopefully, if all goes well. So Antonio says, I often get the impression that I meditate better when I'm alone than when I'm in a group. Do you think this is wrong? Bhante Sumita?
Yes and no. Because you can practice alone, but later on you have to also be able to live with everyone. You can run away from the society also. It's okay to practice alone, but that theory should be applied in the mainstream society. So sometimes you see like people are very agitated, very anxious, excited, and also irritating, anger. All these things can be there in the mainstream society. But then, as a practitioner, what is the point if you can live there? So you need to practice yourself to be strong within, and then when you go to the mainstream society, you should be able to apply that theory. So I think, so from time to time you practice alone, and then also from time to time practice with a group, but practice with the thing that is more comfortable to you. Later on, just accept your own practice, that try to be with the other practitioners too. Maybe they can also inspire sometimes. You will also learn more tips maybe from their wonderful practices.
Thank you, Venerable. And Shadowlabel asks, are there Buddhist monks that are ready to move into space? This is a great question for Bhante Siddhasa.
Me, I volunteer. Actually, in all honesty, yes, I would be happy to give that a try. And I know some other monks who would also volunteer for that. So yes, there are Buddhist monks who would be ready to move into space. Yeah. So when there starts, like if they had an opening for a Buddhist chaplain on the space station, I would sign up tomorrow. If they start a colony on the moon or Mars or something, and they're willing to support a Buddhist monk, I'd be happy to go along. Yeah.
Empty cloud.
Literally empty cloud.
I call it empty moon.
Yeah, also empty of oxygen. So we'll see.
You can practice akasana and chayatana easily.
Yeah.
All right. And Aurora asks, what is the origin of the 32 marks of a great man? Is it from an earlier religion? Anyone wants to volunteer for the 32 marks of a great man?
Well, this is actually one of the great mysteries of the Buddhist texts. Because it's spoken about as though it was already something that was commonly known in ancient India, but it's not mentioned in any non-Buddhist texts. Like it's not mentioned in the religious texts of any other spiritual tradition. So it's one of the mysteries. Where did this come from? Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't put any importance on it. Like some people get really hung up on the 32 marks, but I don't see the point in getting hung up on it because it doesn't have anything to do with awakening. If you delete every reference to the 32 marks, then you still have a complete path to awakening. And if you believe in the 32 marks exactly as they're written, then you still have a complete path to awakening. So I don't personally see a point in making a big deal about it one way or the other. Yeah, I've never been bothered by them. I know some Western monks who, when they started reading the suttas, this was like a deep, unsettling blow to their faith to read about the 32 marks. But that was never my experience. I just like read the 32 marks and I was like, okay, next page, and moved on. So Yeah, where does it come from? I don't know. Does it matter? No, not at all. What matters is, how can you practice Sila, Samadhi, and Panya? How can you develop the Noble Eightfold Path? How can you experience the Four Noble Truths? How can you see Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta? That matters. So don't worry about the 32 marks. Just focus on practicing the Eightfold Path.
Bante. And Rick asks, Venables, can you share what daily life and formal practice are like in the early years after ordination? Well, that actually depends on a lot of different factors. Well, mostly tradition, lineage, monastery, gender, actually, also. Yeah, so well, for bhikkhus, well, in the West anyway, there's and in Sri Lanka, there's usually a novice period, and also for anyone who is under the age of 20, and also for bhikkhunis, there's usually a novice period. So you spend some time getting acquainted with just being in the form of a monastic, and then once you get full ordination for 5 years, if you have a male body, you're going to be independent, and for 2 years, if you have a female body, you're going to be independent on a teacher or your preceptor, if your preceptor is also your teacher. And then once again, it depends on the different causes and conditions there. But essentially what one wants to cultivate, actually, I remember when we visited Ajahn Jayasaro in Thailand, that, he was essentially like summed it up like the first years in monastic life, you want to be a nobody. And, a lot of people can struggle with that because, especially in the West, and there's a lot of individualism. So we all have our own ideas of what we want to do and what we want our, kuti to look like, from the furniture to the the setup. And then we go and like, there's the schedule that is in this way, but we would like it in this other way. There's lots of sort of things that the mind starts playing, tricks on us. And we want to perhaps be in the center of attention, or if we have a different kind of karmic conditions, perhaps we want to be behind the scenes, but we're forced to be actually in the center of attention. Maybe we don't even decide that, but people are there, push us in the center of attention. So there's so many different things that can happen, and that is why it's important to have a teacher that we can go to and look up to and ask questions, and for them to guide us. But essentially, our practice is to let go of anything that we want for a monastic life to be, and do what is needed, do what is necessary, do what we're told. Very, very difficult practice, but actually very, very rewarding practice. It's also like a big privilege, actually, to be a nobody for so few duties and a minimalist lifestyle. You see it all over the suttas. Few duties and a minimalist lifestyle. So that's usually the case, actually, for monastics with male bodies, but for monastics with female bodies, it's a little bit more complex, because we all aspire to few duties and minimalist lifestyle, but the conditions are a little bit different. So my experience with monastics life has been lots of duties and a complicated lifestyle. So I'm actually like trying to downgrade, rather than upgrade. Some monastics can get really, fixated in the kind of career path. Like, oh, I can't wait until I'm a Thera, so I can have the title of Ajahn, if they're in particular lineages, and that is how it works. So I can like have responsibilities and this and that. I'm like, I can't wait to just become a samadhi. Not necessarily with the level of ordination and precepts, but rather with the level of like the idea of few duties and zero responsibilities, not having to take care of them. That's also, once again, a craving that I have, and it's not the case. So the practice is to let go and do what is needed rather than what we want. So that is what comes to mind. I don't know if the Venerables want to share. Definitely Bhante Sumita has had a more classical training since he was born in Sri Lanka, a Buddhist country, at a very young age. So what was it like? Actually, Bhante, you ordained as a teenager, right? Yeah, so how was it like daily life in the early years after ordination?
It was great. When you become a monk at the very young age, it is different. Definitely, we were much less corrupted, and we had some duties to do, like studying every morning, going to the chanting, and cleaning the temple. All those things. So we were busy working on those things, and our mind was fully occupied with those monk duties, and I think it was really nice. And I remember some of the other young children, they were crying. They wanted to go back home. They were missing their parents. I don't know. Somehow, I when I came back to the temple, that's it. I didn't worry about going back home. I know my mom and all. They wanted to come. Sometimes they used to come and see me, but I didn't have like so craving for to go back home or something. And when I came to the temple, I felt like I was part of the global family. Like everyone in my community, they were like mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters to me. So I didn't have that homesick problem. Even when I go to another country, I just feel like they are my family. So wherever I go, I feel this is my home, this is my country, and so I think I'm good with that. So try to assimilate the situation, adjust to the situation wherever I go, and I feel I try to be comfortable with that situation.
Thank you, Bhante. And Sam says in second verse of Metta Sutta, not burdened with duties, just talking about that, frugal in living, not greedily attached to families. How does this help to cultivate loving kindness?
Well, actually, what comes to mind for me is that if you have a lot of duties, then you're more likely to be stressed out and irritable. So having few duties tends to make you more relaxed. The Pali word is apikicca, which literally means few duties. So if you have few duties, then you're more likely to be relaxed and have a sense of spaciousness and ease, which means you'll be less irritable and less grumpy. Frugal in living, the Pali word is salahukavuti, which means minimalist lifestyle, as Ayasoma was saying. Again, if you don't demand a lot from your life, if you're content with the minimum, content with just the basics, content with having a very simple life and a simple setup, then yeah, similarly, you'll be very relaxed and at ease. You won't have that stress of constantly needing to acquire the latest fashions and the newest gadgets and trying to plan your wall hangings and all that. You can just have a simple life and not need to worry about those things. So that, again, it makes your mind more relaxed and at ease, which makes it easier to have kindness and gentleness towards others. So those are my thoughts.
And not greedily attached to families.
Kulesu ananugido literally means not being greedy when around families. So similarly, that refers to the practice of contentment. So when you're around other people, you're not trying to get anything from them. So since you're not trying to get anything from them, then that gives you the space in your mind to just see how you can help them. Rather than always thinking, what can I get from others? Instead, you're thinking, what can I give to others? How can I help others?
Thank you. And Prakar says, I would like to know the names of Indian monasteries where I can start my monastic life. Bhante Sumita, is the only monk who is more familiar with bhikkhu monasteries, maybe in
In
India.
It depends on your location. India is such a big country, 60 times larger than Sri Lanka. So, so big. And if you are in Maharashtra, there are quite a few temples that I know. And maybe if you let me know, I can get back to you. And in Nagpur, in Pune, and some other places, there are some monasteries that I know. Ulhasnagar, there is one Bante Anand. In other places like Buddha Gaya, so many temples. And in Calcutta, I know some temples. And Savatthi, in Delhi, I know a few temples. So, yeah, it depends on the
Great.
location.
Thank you, Bante. And Anita asks, how can one overcome the strong pull of sense desires as a layperson? Somehow the mind doesn't get convinced by seeing the danger, gratification, and escape unless it's done over and over. What do you mean, unless it's done over and over? The action or the contemplation? But overcome the strong pull of sense desires as a layperson, precepts. Why do you think we have the precepts? They're not just like some kind of cute thing that we take at the temple and then forget about it as soon as we leave. I mean, we can do that, but it's not very particularly useful. But rather, they're actually gifts, really incredible gifts that the Buddha has given us. The 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, basically what also Bhante Sumita was talking about earlier. Practicing in that way, taking the 8 precepts once a month, twice a month, even more times a month, perhaps going on retreats and taking them for that period of time. So then in that way, whenever we take precepts, we actually, and we follow them, we practice JOMO, the joy of missing out, rather than FOMO, the fear of missing out. Because the more actually you keep on following your sense desires, the more like you can't really possibly experience everything. We have a big stomach and a small mouth, so we are hungry ghosts by default, actually, when it comes to sensual pleasures. So that's where the fear of missing out comes from, because we're like, oh, there's so much out there, like I can't possibly like have everything, but I'm pretty sure that one of these things is going to make me happy, and we're in this constant state of anxiety. So we focus on the gratification of things, but actually even there we're very deluded. One of the things that Bhante Sudazo said to me earlier on in my practice during a Dhamma talk, so not technically to me, but to many people, but really made an impression in my mind, was that, whenever we get what we want, so if we want the pen, and we spend so much time thinking, oh, I want the pen, and we put so much effort in getting the pen, then we get the pen. We're like, oh, I'm so happy. Oh, finally, I got the pen. So we think that the pen made us happy, right? But instead, actually, it's because once we got the pen, or whatever it is that we are seeking, in that moment, we cease wanting it. Stop desiring it. So we fool ourselves. We create delusion that it's the pen that made us happy. But in reality, it's the cessation of craving the pen that made us happy in that instant. It's just that then we were like, okay, I'm done with the pen, but where is the paper? I need the paper. If only I can have the paper, I'm going to be happy. And then we get the paper. And we're like, what next? I need a table. And then what next? I need this. It's this endless quest. But the Buddha goes to the root. So, it's instead of this constant state of agitation, we actually have a different escape, that it's not in acquiring something else, but rather relinquishing desire, relinquishing renunciation, letting go, these beautiful words that we say. And that's why also there's such an emphasis on practicing dana, on practicing giving in Buddhism. because you basically, the more you give, the more you're practicing that. It's like going to the gym. You're getting this strength of letting go, letting go, letting go. And it's not a sad sort of predicament. You go to any Asian Buddhist temple, everybody's happy and everybody's giving things away, no matter how poor or how rich the people are. Everybody's happy. I was so blown away at the very beginning, actually at the very beginning. Well, I'm still at the beginning, so I'm still blown away, but I think I'm going to be blown away at the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. It's just so beautiful to see, Buddhist cultures. I'm so happy. So that's how you overcome. Practice giving and practice holding the precepts. Excellence can be acquired without constant practice, I like to say. And Abhishek says, no, actually it's not Abhishek. Prakar says, is English language mandatory before joining a monastery? I'm an Indian. It won't be possible for me to grab the American accent. I think you're fine with your Indian accent. And I'm pretty sure that the monasteries Bhante in India speak Hindi or whichever dialect that is they're located in, correct?
Yeah, I still don't have the accent here. I'm struggling with it.
We like your accent just as it is.
Yeah, just be natural and original.
Yeah, I have an original Italian accent. Only Bhante also has the American accent. And Abhishek asks, are there any Theravada monasteries that support junior monks doing social impact type of work?
Not really. Usually when you're a junior monk, you're just trying to get your basic training, and that takes many years. So it's kind of like somebody goes to med school and they're like, is it okay for freshmen in med school to practice surgery? And it's like, well, no, not really. You should wait until you graduate and you have your doctor's license before you start operating on people. So it's the same. When you're a junior monk, you're just focused on getting your training. Then after you've had several years of training, then you can start doing things in the world if that's what you want to do. But yeah, don't start getting wrapped up in social work when you're just newly ordained. That's a really bad idea. Just focus on getting a good, solid training for several years. Then if you want to do social impact work, you can do it then.
And are there arguments in the Buddhist community relating to science and evolution, like with Christian creationism? Not that I'm aware of. I think that Buddhism is the only religion that does not contradict science. As my first Buddhist friend, Ravi, used to tell me when I was a layperson. Ravi was from Sri Lanka. He was very proud of this fact. But it's true, right? Like, I don't think there's anything.
I can't think of anywhere where we have a problem. In fact, the basic principles of science are quite respectable. Yeah, there's no problem.
Yeah. Bhante, can you think of anything that is in contradiction with science?
I think science still is limited when it comes to like those meditational deep practices. Science is still investigating. Science can still be subject to change. Theory is still evolving. I think the scientists can also learn many things from Buddhism.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. Thank you, Bhante. Yeah, there's still a lot of question marks within science, but not within Buddhism. And Natalie says, do you have any advice for somebody who wants to start the journey into Buddhism, but is too scared to go to the temple near their house? Just do it. Just go. And people will be so welcoming. I have to say that my foray, like my entry point into Buddhism, was actually through Asian Buddhist temples. And it was so delightful. Like, actually, I went the first time out of curiosity, and people were so welcoming, especially in the Theravada tradition. like Thai people, Sri Lankan people are the most, actually, I think are the two groups of people that because I like a lot their forms of Buddhism. So I used to go to both temples. Extremely welcoming. They'll show you everything. They won't expect that you know how to do things because they know you're not born Buddhist. So they will teach you essentially how to do things and teach you dana, teach you generosity. Like lay people, still, even now that I'm a monastic, I always learn a lot from Buddhist lay people. So yeah, just do it, and then you'll see how heartwarming it is, and you'll be part of this extended community of people worldwide. Wherever you go in the world, you can go to a Buddhist temple and you'll feel at home. It's so special, very beautiful. It can be in France. When we went to France, we were traveling and going to all sorts of different Buddhist temples, and everybody was receiving us with a smile. And Australia was the same. Thailand, it was the same. Everywhere was the same. California was the same. Yeah. See you. Sumita smiling already. So yes, just go and you'll find a lot of smiling lay people and monastics. So it's very good. And Lee says, what did the Buddha say about how, when, why samsara originated?
The Buddha said you cannot find a starting point.
Yeah, actually connected to the question before about science. I think the Dalai Lama was the one that said, or Rinpoche, Big Bang, no problem in Buddhism, just not only one. Over and over again, Big Bang, Big Bang, Big Bang. Yeah, it destroys and then comes into being again. And Prakar says, can I join a monastery with my uneven body? They told me physically uneven body can be a distraction that can be compromised if one is eligible. Can it be? I am male. I just have tall legs and look awkward, but not having any mental physical disease. Having tall legs is fine. You're okay. There's no problem. You're all right.
I mean, some monasteries, they'll be hesitant to ordain somebody who has serious health problems. But what you're describing doesn't sound like a problem. And if you go to a monastery and they tell you no because of that reason, well, then just go somewhere else. There are literally millions of Buddhist monasteries in the world. Just go and find another one.
All right, and that was the last question of the evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and we will be meeting again next week. So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 8 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. New York City time. So every Friday there's monk chats. If you have other questions in the meanwhile, feel free to bring them up for monk chat. And next week, I think it will be a Bhante Sudhaza special mostly, as the monastics here will be in different parts of the United States. But on Wednesday morning, we have Venerable Palaniani, Venerable Palaniani, the abbot of Anja Vihara. She's a bhikkhuni ordained in the Theravada tradition, who will be sharing teachings with us next week. And also in Wednesday evening, Ajahn Punadhammo, ordained in the Thai forest tradition, who's a monk from Canada. All right, so we can end as usual with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well and happy. May all good things come to you.